Hey guys, welcome back. BDCKR here. We're back with another one of our weekly Q&A videos. This is season 9, episode 15. Now I say Q&A videos, but this exists both as a YouTube video and as a podcast. And whichever one you're on now, if you're trying to find the other one, you need to go outside your home right now. And there should be a man in a red suit somewhere. He's within like 10 kilometers of your house. He's not necessarily close to you, but you need to go find him and then whisper, Archimedes into his ear, and he'll take you to the other format. So if you're on one now, you're that's good, you're there. But if you want to find the other one, you're gonna have a hard time. You're gonna really have to track somebody down. There's a whole process. He's gonna take you on an adventure. He's got like a couple riddles for you and all that. So maybe just keep going on the format that you're currently on, because it's, in my opinion, it's more trouble than it's worth to find us on the other one.
I have no words. I'm bereft of words.
Okay. Well, that's it. So did you have any comments about what we're going to be watching on the video?
I do week? Actually. So,
which is going to be a real shame for anybody who's on the podcast version, because you're not going to be able to see it.
But I just want to at least make the comment. So this week's fights are going to highlight both the challenge character this week, who are Dawn of Justice Superman, and the multiplayer character Reverse Flash. And one thing I'd mentioned, I think in our recap of last week, was, if you use Claw of Horus with Dawn of Justice Superman, does the gear shattering effect of his passive stack with the gear? And it's hard to prove it. And I actually got footage this week when I had the both Reverse Flash and Dawn of Justice Superman on the same team. But that's not what matters, is that we're facing Raven. I checked ahead of time. She's got 3 pieces of the full set of the Fourth World Gear set. And one special one shattered 2 pieces. And you know how I know that?
Because she didn't have a revive anymore.
Right. And there was 2 separate animations. There's the first shatter at the beginning of the special one, and the second shatter as he finishes, because he's one of the Supermen that has more than one hit. Mm-hmm. So it's that whole punch and then like an uppercut.
So you saw both the animation of it and the effect of it.
And so she lost her revive. And what's funny is, it used to be that revive, it wouldn't have been as obvious, because revive used to, when it was overpowered, revive used to happen with all 3 pieces. And heal was with 2, so they reversed it, because even though it's counterintuitive, healing at that point was way more powerful, because you could heal yourself out of anything. So you only need 2 gear slots for it, and you could use your 3rd gear slot for doing something else, and you just keep on healing and healing, and it would make fights drag on like crazy. So if I can time it right, maybe this is about the 3-minute mark. Maybe I'll pull that video or that clip at the beginning so you can really see it. And it's I didn't think I'd have an answer, but we
getting
do.
Fancy with it. Okay.
Yeah.
So there we go. And our first question this week, or comment, I guess, comes from Cameron107, responding to us talking last week about how the Injustice community seems relatively non-toxic compared to just the way that a lot of the internet has like a small proportion of any sort of large group that seems to just suck, for lack of a better word. And they say, I've thought a lot about why this is. Most gaming communities I frequent tend to be pretty toxic, but Injustice seems to be the exception. Part of the reason is obviously because there's not too many people, but I think the biggest thing is low expectations of the game. I'm always shocked to see how entitled most gaming communities tend to be in regards to expecting frequent updates, free stuff regularly, no bugs or glitches, and also expecting the game to be completely free to play. If any of these things don't happen, then the devs must be incompetent, money-hungry, lazy, or they must not care about the player base and, quote, my grandma could make a better game than this, etc. With Injustice, our expectations are so ridiculously low because we're surprised the game hasn't been completely killed off yet. They released an update a few months ago for minor bug fixes and we got excited. The sad reality is that if the game were more popular, we would probably be just as entitled and toxic as other fan bases, which I think
that's a good
punchline. This is a great comment. Yeah, it really takes you on a journey. It goes,
plot twist.
And I think that is a good point, because I think there was sort of, when the game was bigger, there was a higher proportion of people who were doing kind of crappy stuff, honestly. And I think community management also is so huge. I think that's one of the things that I've learned, is that when left to their own devices, the internet will frequently become a terrible place. But when you have sort of the right starting place for a community, and especially when there's somebody sort of not necessarily even imposing their values, but somebody modeling values who helps create a community, it can be really good. So, for example, Celeste. Celeste has a really wonderful community. Are you aware of this game at all?
I don't know Celeste.
So Celeste is a platformer made by this game developer named Maddie Thorson. Right. And what's really cool is it's a really wonderful game. I'm gonna give light spoilers for the plot of Celeste, but it's really a game about the platforming, and it's one of those games where what is great about it is the heart in it. The story is sort of centered around the heart and the emotions more than the specific plot, because it's about this girl climbing a mountain, and it's pixel art, and she goes up and she...
When you say pixel art, you mean like 16-bit or something?
Yeah, like low poly. Yeah.
Okay.
And she's climbing a mountain, and along the way she meets these people who, either help her or give her challenges in her journey.
Right.
And it is a game about sort of summiting and overcoming difficulty. And it's also a game about sort of like depression and anxiety. And it's also kind of accidentally a little bit a game about being trans, because the developer was sort of going through the process of understanding herself throughout it. And it wasn't explicit, and it was something that sort of almost got stumbled into because the game reflected the person making it. Right? The main creative force behind it. And then it was made explicit in the future DLC. And so it's a huge amount of fun to play. It's really cool. It feels really heartfelt. I have a hard time saying anything bad about the game. And the really cool thing is it's tough as nails. It's brutal. It's really hard. But it also has one of the most forgiving and interesting accessibility systems, where you can slow down time to a certain percent. You can make it so that it's impossible for you to die. You can make it so that you have infinite, essentially boosts in the air. So it lets you customize the difficulty in a way where maybe if it's just a little bit too twitchy for you, right? A little bit too reflex heavy, you can turn it down to 50% or 40% speed in 10% increments and make it more deliberate and easier for you to play. And it's a wonderful touch on a genre like hard platformers and hard video games in general that has often prided itself on sort of having one difficulty and that being the only way to go.
And appealing to the twitchy people.
And just saying, this is what's important to it. We have to do it this way. Right. It's kind of like, I love Dark Souls and I love the Dark Souls series.
Right.
But only ever one difficulty, and they go, the difficulty is part of it. And Celeste takes all that and says, the difficulty is an important part of it. And when you go to turn the assist mode on, they go, you're supposed to... die a lot, and you're supposed to have a little bit of trouble in the game. This is the way that it's meant to be played. That being said, I want you to be able to experience this game however you want, so here you go. And so it gives you that sort of little message to say, don't feel bad, but also
it's accessibility.
If it's hard, that doesn't mean you're not good. It's supposed to be hard. But that being said, go through the game the way you want. And that's just every single part of the game feels really considerate and kind and cool like that. And that has a wonderful community, which I've seen very little toxicity from. And I think part of it is the way that it would be such a hard product to care about and then also find toxicity in your heart without being really sort of antithetical to what it's about.
It's already selected out the people.
Yeah.
Right. That's, it resonates with me. There used to be that saying, some people would use it as an excuse where if some parents I remember seeing would be, if their kids told them something wasn't fair and their excuse was life isn't fair. Mm-hmm. And it seems like that should be the exact opposite, because if life isn't fair, then what we should be doing is actually actively trying to improve it. Yeah. And the other thing that you were talking about, what you made me think of when you were talking about Celeste was, people have said exactly the same thing about The Matrix. And it's been on my mind because I've been meaning to watch Matrix Resurrections, and I've been sort of a little hesitant because I see all these kind of reviews that compare it unfavorably to the other ones. But part of me thinks, a lot of people who really don't like it, though, are kind of dicks.
Maybe, yeah.
You know what I mean? I think part of it is that any movie after Matrix can't be as good only because you can really only do that once. And if you're going to continue the series, the only way it's successful is you do something different. And they don't really. I mean, they're still working within the limitations of the bigger storyline, because if it's not, then it's no longer The Matrix, really, right? Because there's that... To me, The Matrix, a lot of it relied on the visual aesthetic. the special effects and that surprise of both the plot, but also what they decided to do with the visual effects.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that you could actually do. It would have been hard. I mean, in retrospect, they didn't, but it would have been hard to do something completely different.
Yeah.
To make it fresh and make it new, and that freshness was what I think made the original Matrix movie so good. But I do want to see it.
It's hard to go back to sort of that same well a second time. You need a really compelling reason. What that reminds me of is another really, really wonderful piece of media, Fleabag.
Oh my God, Fleabag was such a good show.
And I would argue that it had a better second season.
Right.
And it had a better second season because the creator... Oh, her name is escaping me right now.
Phoebe Waller-Bridge.
Phoebe Waller-Bridge. Yeah, is it Bridge or is it Bridgers?
I don't know. We could look it up, but
anyways,
it would be too clickety-clackety on a keyboard.
But yeah, where she did one season, she had her thing. It was an Edinburgh Fringe Festival, like one-woman play, I believe, right? That was adapted for TV, and then she said, okay, that's it, I'm done. Unless I have a really good idea. And then she had a really good idea and came back. And there's a special place in my heart for stuff where they know exactly when to end it.
Yeah.
And she knew where to end it, and then she knew how to bring it back, and she managed to do something really, really good the second time. She managed to go back to the same thing, but it wasn't because she did the same thing again. It was because she had a compelling twist.
Right. Yeah.
She had a spin that made it fresh and new again and gave her a new place to go with it.
I need to watch that again.
Yeah.
I remember it's been a while. The cool thing about me is as I get older, probably when I was younger too, I don't remember the details much. I remember how I felt about it. I remember watching it and thinking, holy crap, this is brilliant.
Yeah. Well, because that's the interesting thing is that I had a friend watch it recently, and they weren't really that sucked in by season 1. They said season 1 was all right.
Right.
And I remember enjoying season 1, but it was a while ago, so I was like, oh man, that sucks. And I was like, but I remember loving the show so much. And then they watched season 2, and they said, oh my god, season 2 was good.
Yeah, yeah.
And so that's impressive, because I think Fleabag did something with season 1.
Right.
Right? But for it to go back and then do something with season 2 that, it's the gimmick, but then it's made just that much better, I think is impressive.
I think this not to artificially try to pull this back into Injustice, but I think this is one of those things that happens when people talk about Injustice 1, Injustice 2, and the possibility of Injustice 3. Is that
we have a question later actually about.
But it relies in like when you extend a franchise, it's not always extending the same stuff, right? You want to pull in the things that made people like it in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
But if you pull in too much of it and it's too much of the same thing, people get tired of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so you take something that they liked, you give them more of it, and some people will be happy with that.
Yeah.
And some people will be frustrated because they would have been just as happy with what they'd originally had, I guess. And then there's still another small group that don't care what it is because they just get to revisit these characters and they're still happy with it. But it becomes sort of the size of the audience becomes more fractured, and it has less of the same kind of appeal that it had originally. Well,
that's one of the criticisms of games today, right? Is that the way that we value and think about games as their size and their scope and the amount of value, the amount of time you can get out of them, has made a lot of people make experiences which would have been a lot better as like a tight 6 hours, and then try to stretch it out to 20 hours or give you more of the same. Like that's one of the biggest things I've heard about the Doom series, the new reboots, is that they're great, but a lot of people get bored by the end of them just because they've got a lot of inherent fun in them. It's inherently fun to play, but there's not enough changing from section to section to section to push people through it. And I found myself having a really hard time going back and replaying those games. I love them, and for me, there was enough for me to push through and beat both of those games. I didn't fall off partway through like a lot of people have said they have, but then I have never really been able to go back to them properly because I feel like I've just done it. I just feel like I've done it before, and the levels are similar enough to each other that I feel like I play a little bit of it and then I get a sense of what it is, and then I'm like, okay, I remember this, and I already did all of it.
Which is why I think there's some content, and I hate using the word content because it feels so catchy and so slangy of the time. And that kind of, you know what I mean? Like the hipster kind of talk. But it's true because there's it covers, we're talking about books, we're talking TV shows, movies, whatever. The content in games, it's content that rewards you for coming back to it.
Yeah.
That's the best kind, where there's layers of it and where you can enjoy it even more the next time you watch it, or the next time you play it, or the next time you listen to it. I love that.
Yeah.
And so when I find a book that's particularly like that, where I can come back to it and it's so rich,
yeah,
those are classics.
Mm-hmm. I had one of my friends has recently reread Name of the Wind series, and what he does with it is he highlights passages that he thinks are foreshadowing for that might get paid off in book 3 in some way.
Right.
And so he's gone through it, and that Name of the Wind is a good example of that type of media, right? Where you can go through it, and there's a lot of stuff that you can really sink your teeth into if you want to.
Right.
There's a lot of stuff being laid down there, and there's a lot of plates in the air, and a lot of them do actually come down in one way or another, you know, already just within the 2 books, right? But, you know, hopefully even more so within the last one. But, no, sorry, did you go?
No, it's just that it's a perfect illustration. So for me, as a reader who normally doesn't remember details, Name of the Wind is a perfect example where there's so much emotional heft to some of the storylines that when they tie together and pay off at the same time, I'm thinking specifically of that scene.
I know the one that you're talking about.
I still remember details of that, where I don't remember many other details of that book, never mind other books or whatever.
Yeah. You will forget that you've seen a whole movie.
Right.
We'll have watched a movie together, and
Yes.
I'll say, you saw this movie, and you go, I don't remember that. And I go, it's the one where, and then I give you a brief summary of the plot, and then you go, no, that doesn't sound familiar at all to me. And I go, I know you watched it with me, but
Right.
you still remember a specific scene.
Oh, those moments.
And you've brought it up to me multiple times, like, almost entirely unprompted. Just when we're talking about other, like, cool moments in a show, you'll be like, oh, you know what that reminds me of?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know who does that really well? Is Guy Gavriel Kay. So he's a Canadian fantasist. It's sort of, you know, loosely kind of historical fantasy based on real historical times, but with enough of the serial numbers sort of rubbed out so that you don't, it's not exactly it. And he puts magical elements into it.
I think it's filed off.
Filed off? Rubbed out. Yeah. Okay. So sorry. Okay. But what's cool is he has lots of these moments in his books, in every one of his books where he builds up to it. There's all these tendrils that sort of come together in these moments, and it pays off in such a big way.
Yeah.
I feel that same way. Like another thing like that is, like there's certain things that are happening in Ted Lasso. We're almost done. We've got 1 episode left in the 2nd season to watch. And where there's like an emotional weight to some of these moments that wouldn't exist if you hadn't built up to it from the previous season, most of the 2 seasons.
Yeah.
I just think Sherlock Holmes, the 3rd season, the one with the Benedict Cumberbatch.
Yeah.
Same kind of stuff. I really love when, so talking more about sequels and series and stuff, right? Where instead of just doing more of the same thing, they do something a little bit different, like something different to say. And then for what you've invested in it, they make it pay off. I love stuff like that.
Yeah, and I think it's really hard. I think part of the problem is that's, like, I don't know how people do it, because I would never be able to write that, you know? I would never be able to craft that, but yeah, it's cool. Anyways, I talked a lot about other random media. We've got off on a tangent as usual. I guess to go back to the original thing.
Oh, yeah.
Do you have more thoughts?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
So when you were talking about how when you've got smaller fan base, and this is a good example. So it's not even just that we would become, although it's funny to think of it like that if we were part of if Injustice were bigger and we were still doing this, that we would be more demanding and toxic and
that every
entitled.
person as individuals would be more
but
toxic.
it's funny. What I see it as is that when you've got a smaller group, I feel there's another 2 factors at work. So all these things I totally agree with Cameron. But there's another 2 factors at work, is that when you've got a lot of people, even though the really awful people, the toxic people, the people that make it unpleasant, have a very large outsized voice. It is outsized. There's a small number of people. So when you have a much larger group, you're more likely to run into one of these people. So in a small group, it just happens less. But also in a small group, even if it happens, people in a smaller community, people are more accountable.
Yeah.
Right? So when you've got a really large community, you have a place to hide. You can walk away from one place and, you know, people don't know you, and you can sort of start your new stuff somewhere else, or you get a chance to start over, or you get to pretend it was never you, right?
But in a small group, you get to gatekeep for the greater good.
I don't even know if it's gatekeeping. It's that
Take me flow.
it's that people don't get to walk away from bad behavior the same way, where you can just, without making amends in any way, you can just pretend it never happened and then just start over with another place in that community and sort of maybe restart or reinvent yourself. And I think because it's such a small group that, you know, it's harder to hide bad behavior.
That's true. Yeah.
Maybe that's it. That's what I'm getting at.
So anyways, yeah, I'm happy with the Injustice community in general, and also the people who hang out with us specifically. I think we've got a pretty decent crew, and hopefully, for whatever small part we play in steering the ship, I wouldn't say in the broader Injustice community, but just for the people who watch us, hopefully any spaces that we ever have the honor of helping to curate a little bit, we encourage to not be toxic. I talked about Discord before, right? And how I understood Discord as this place of toxicity, and I've heard about people like secondhand, like getting in trouble or whatever for somebody saying something offensive on like a Discord server that this person was like organizing, and then, you know, it feels like an implicit endorsement. And I know that Discord can sort of run into those issues, and I feel really grateful for my friends, because I'm thinking of a specific example. I have a friend who's a lot more sort of into Discord and that ecosystem than I am, and so when we do servers, he's the person who tends to manage them. And we had a server with pronouns, and somebody did joking pronouns, and he said, yeah, okay, he like added them. They just joined the server. They were somebody like a mutual. It was for playing games, and he added them and said, "Hey, fix your pronouns." And the person was like, "Oh, haha, I did something non-committal." He's like, "No, actually, fix your pronouns, or I'm going to kick you out now." And so I hear those stories about people going like, "Oh, well, you can't really be like responsible for what, you know, people say, like just because it's your server, right? Whatever." And then I think of my my friend who not only can moderate that but does it, and then will say, "No, you're gone," and just like, that's what, don't be a dick, or that's it. And I think I respected him a lot for that, and that's the kind of space management that I would aspire to do if I ever did any myself. I don't think we do very much of that ourselves. Other than maybe like, you know, blocking certain like profanity or like slurs in our like comments. But I think that's the good stuff right there.
Okay. So that made me think of something else that I just refreshed my memory recently about, just managing community and setting boundaries and figuring out where to set the boundaries, because I think there's a real danger when you've grown up in a world, or where your world has been, where you've been rejected from things. The tendency is to try to be as inclusive as possible, and that some of what is required of managing community is to specifically exclude elements that are going to poison the thing that you're trying to create, and it can happen before you even realize it. So there's somebody on Twitter whose handle is @IamRageSparkle, and this, I love this story. Okay, so it's just a series of tweets. Do you mind if I read it a little bit? This is performance. This is like I'm performing some tweets. I was at a shitty crust punk bar once getting an after-work beer. One of those holes where the bartenders clearly hate you. So the bartender and I were ignoring one another when someone sits next to me, and he immediately says, "No, get out." And the dude next to me says, "Hey, I'm not doing anything. I'm a paying customer." And the bartender reaches under the counter for a bat or something and says, "Out. Now." And the dude leaves, kind of yelling. And he was dressed in a punk uniform, I noticed. Anyway, I asked what that was about, and the bartender was like, "You didn't see his vest, but it was all Nazi crap. Iron crosses and stuff. You get to recognize them." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And he continues, "You have to nip it in the bud immediately. These guys come in, and it's always a nice, polite one. And you serve them because you don't want to cause a scene. And then they become a regular, and after a while, they bring a friend. And that dude is cool too. And then they bring friends, and the friends bring friends, and they stop being cool. And then you realize, oh crap, this is a Nazi bar now. And it's too late because they're entrenched, and if you try to kick them out, they cause a problem. So you have to shut them down." And I was like, "Oh, damn." And he said, "Yeah, you have to ignore the reasonable arguments because their end goal is to be terrible, awful people." And then he went back to ignoring me. But I haven't forgotten that at all.
Okay, that's
I love that story.
solid series of tweets. Yeah,
I love that story, and it makes again. This is the whole. I think of that every time you talk about trying to create a community and how it's not really. It's superficially only a good argument to say, well, how can you really be inclusive if you're trying to exclude people? I think there's still something to be said for specifically excluding elements that are really anti-community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely fair. Okay, so that's I think a good button for that.
Yeah.
Our community is awesome. Yeah, so thanks to the Injustice mobile community in general, but also the folks who watch us. We think it's pretty cool over here.
And it's a great game too.
Yeah.
I still have to say, I mean, everything else being said, if I couldn't keep on playing it like I have for I don't know how many years and play it pretty regularly, it still wouldn't be a go. I mean, it's necessary but not sufficient.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So our next comment, and I don't think we're going to touch on this for very long, but random user AKC says, I finally learned how to find you. And I think that was in response to us last week giving clear instructions at the beginning of our video on how to find us. And if you were happy last week, you must be dismayed this week because it's gotten a lot worse.
So this is hilarious. My problem sometimes is I'm so disconnected from it drops out of my head. Mm-hmm. Content. We have these Q&As.
You don't listen to me.
I don't listen. Well, I listen to you, but I don't remember all the details. I just remember we had a nice conversation, and then I see this comment, and I don't make the connection. And it wasn't until you pointed it out that I realized, oh yeah, that is what we talked about.
And that's funny.
Yeah, I know.
That's actually a funny response. Yeah, that's one of the funny things. So we're just plugging other stuff this week. We're talking about a lot of other media that we. But
that's our joy. That's what I wanted to do originally with this channel. Actually,
yeah. But I love Mabim Bam, right, and the McElroy brothers,
right.
And that's one of the things that they've talked about a couple of times in different episodes of their podcast. And I'm sure I remember this better than they do because that's their whole joke: is that people will go back and tweet things at them, and they'll go, "Oh, that's pretty funny," and then they'll realize that they're quoting one of them from an episode,
right.
And that the jokes that people will have their favorite joke from one of their episodes, right. And they'll have no recollection whatsoever of saying it because they do this, every week for years,
right?
And they're like,
"Hey, those are funny guys. We should have them on our show."
Yeah, but they're on some level less invested, not in the producing of it, right? They obviously care a lot about it,
right.
But in each individual thing they say, they have to be, and that's sort of how we are too, right? I mean, people might hear stuff and might pick something up here or there, and I guess we might too. But the other thing is that outside of this podcast, we just talk to each other. So that's sometimes true. It's well, did we talk about this on the podcast? Did we talk about this in real life? And what did we say? And then somebody makes a response to one moment of this piece of media,
right?
And you have no clue what they're talking about,
right?
Because they, in their head, they just listen to us say something,
right? They're jumping in conversation at that moment,
but we're hearing it days later,
yeah.
And it's a response to a one-off single sentence that we said. Thankfully, this was based off of a pattern at the start of our videos, so I got it, but you didn't pick up on it.
I did not.
Yeah. Anyways. So there we go. That's that comment, and I think we maybe have time for one or two more.
I think I've got some decent amount of footage this week from the Dawn of Justice Reverse Flashing, which turns out to be pretty good. Dawn of Justice Superman is pretty wicked fun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So our next comment comes from R3S Films, and they say, I hope I'm on your list you guys mentioned with the questions you're interested in. I'm glad you guys are so passionate about all this stuff. You guys are the only podcast I listen to. And low-key, when I'm grinding Injustice, I get so much joy. Even my girlfriend listens with me. Love you guys. Thank you. So that's a really nice comment.
Yeah.
I would say you should listen to more podcasts. There's a lot of really good podcasts out here, and the problem is, here's the problem with recommending other podcasts and other media that's sort of similar to ours, is that if I recommend the right one to you, you might stop listening to us.
Is it a zero-sum game, though?
I don't know if it's a zero-sum. It's not for me, but I think there's a lot of really solid podcasts out there.
Oh, I totally agree. There's podcasts that I know I want to listen to.
Yeah.
My issue is carving out the right kind of time, because I know a lot of people listen to podcasts when they're doing stuff.
Yeah.
I just can't. I need to pay attention to it, and I have trouble listening to something where I'm focused on something else. So even when I'm driving is probably the best time. I spend that time calling people and talking to people that I don't get to see.
Yeah.
And so when I actually have downtime, I'm doing stuff.
Yeah, but a lot of times you're playing Injustice. You could probably listen to a podcast while you play Injustice.
Except the Injustice is what we're talking like the double ultimate. We're talking 15 minutes at a time.
Yeah.
So could I like there's one podcast called Ex Urbe that's by Joe Walton and Ada Palmer.
Yeah.
Who are two science fiction writers. Mm-hmm. And I've listened to a few of them and they're really interesting. I just have trouble finding the time to listen to them.
Mm. Yeah, no.
So the 15 minutes, it feels like I get invested and I'm going with the flow of their ideas. And if I stop it, if I don't have I don't have time to listen to the whole episode, I lose the train of it. And then when I come back to it,
it's nothing to you.
Yeah, I have to start listening to it from the beginning again.
Yeah. That's why you got to listen on like 1.5 times speed.
Mm.
You gotta crank up the speed a little bit so that 15 minutes becomes like a cool, like, I don't know, 17 and a half. Not 17, more than that, sorry. 70. Way more than that.
Yeah. So 1.5 would be 3/2, so 2/3.
Yeah.
That's math. I'm mathing right now.
Anyways.
So it's a ratio.
The important bit is we appreciate that. And you are on the list. I think we answered a question last week from R3S Films.
And I'll tell you, if your girlfriend is listening with you and sharing something that you enjoy, either she enjoys it, or if she doesn't, but she just enjoys spending time with you, that's a keeper.
So there.
I think that's my relationship advice for today. Is that but it is important because you don't even have to have like agree with each other on the same stuff. But I think the key to long-term relationship often has to be that you enjoy spending time together. Because if you don't, again, it's not sufficient. Mm-hmm. I think it's necessary though, because if you don't enjoy spending time together, why are you together? Mm-hmm. So that's kind of cool. So definitely a keeper.
That's fun. Okay. I think we can do one more.
Yeah. Especially since I think it's thematically related.
So this one comes from Yeah Mate, and they say you guys should put timestamps in the beginning of different subjects in your videos. And broadly speaking, so first off, we're not going to do it, but I agree with you.
Oh, we should. We totally should. But it ties into the whole thing where...
And we 100% have talked about this before.
Yeah.
But we used to have somebody who put timestamps in our videos named iProfit. Mm-hmm. And we've had different people sort of take up that mantle and put in timestamps at the beginning of our videos for here and there.
And if you do that in a comment, we will pin that to the video as that top comment that everybody sees. But we just, like you said earlier, we're more invested in producing it than we are in... I mean, I just wouldn't have the patience or the time to listen through again, even to skim it, to try to find out where everything starts and stops.
And we go off on so many tangents. The ways that people have traditionally done section headers is they've based off of the original comment and not where we go with it.
Right.
So they will go like, this one would be like, yeah, mate, timestamps, right? And they'll do the name and then they'll do some piece of information that orients people to what we talk about. And then if you're really extra with it, you can subdivide within that when we go off on a tangent and what our tangent is.
Right.
And so people have done that work and we really appreciate it, but it is work. And the other thing is that for somebody else who's listening, they get to maybe listen to it for the first time and then at certain moments go, oh, they're moving on, and then make a note of that. However they did, I don't know. People's processes for that was, but they make a note of that and then they comment it when they're done going through it. For us, we'd have to have a conversation and then listen back to our entire conversation again. And that sounds
painful,
torturous. That sounds really bad.
Yeah.
As we mentioned this a bunch of times, we do this for fun. We're not making, minimum wage even on this, right? We wouldn't even be making
bank.
We wouldn't be making minimum wage for one person on this. We do this because we, broadly speaking, like it. Clearly, if you look at our views, right? There's nobody's paying us enough to do this.
If we were making in an hour what we make in a month, then we'd be making more than minimum wage.
Yeah. But 2
hours we're not.
Yeah. So we won't do it because it's work, but we will sincerely appreciate anybody who does it for us. We're not asking you to do it, but you can be the change that you'd like to see. And the part of the problem is the reason why I think it takes a little bit of a special person to do that is that they have to be doing it selflessly, because in order to do it, the people who want it are people who don't want to watch the whole thing.
Right.
Who want to be able to jump around.
Right.
And who go, I don't care about this topic. I want to skip to when they're done talking about it. But I also don't want to do the thing where I hammer the 10 seconds forward button or click around and try to find something randomly because they ramble so much that it wouldn't entirely be clear if they're on a new question or not if I skip forward more than a minute anyways.
Right.
But the people who do it have to go through the whole thing. And then not only that, there's that extra layer of thinking about it a little bit and how to organize the information in a way that's helpful to other people. So you need to be thoughtful about how to organize that information. You need to be doing something for somebody else. And not for yourself. And you also need to be doing something for somebody else who is fundamentally different from you. Because for you to do it and for you to want to do it, you need to actually be motivated to watch the whole thing.
Right.
So it's not like, oh yeah, this person is just like me. I wish I could, skip around. Because they're not skipping around. They're in it for the long haul to make sure they're not missing it.
Right.
So I think there's a lot of layers to do that. And I think whoever does that is a star. They're a real gem of a person. Yeah. But I also think that I wouldn't be that person if I was watching our content, right?
No.
I would not go through it. Maybe I would try it once. I would go, oh, maybe that seems like an interesting idea. But I would definitely not have the stick-to-itiveness to keep doing it.
Yeah. As hard as it is to listen to podcasts, to listen to it and then take notes while you're doing it is not me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it requires a very specific type of person that doesn't have a lot of overlap with the people who are actually asking about it. Which is a problem because there's, I think, a lot more people who would like it as a thing than who are willing to do it themselves. And that's maybe not that surprising. That's not that shocking a reveal. But I think it's true. So yeah, if somebody would like to do that, we'd appreciate it. That's very cool. But unfortunately, that person will not be us. Maybe one day, if you guys can blow this channel up, and I don't even know what I mean by that,
well, we could hire somebody to do it for us.
Hire somebody to do it for us, or if you pay me enough, I'll go back through it. I don't know how much that would need to be.
You can't pay me enough.
But if we really make it big, if we hit the big leagues, if we start listening to the people who are trying to give us social media marketing tips about how to structure the start of our videos so we don't say incorrect information, maybe one day we'll get there. That's a throwback to a couple weeks ago. Maybe more than a month ago at this point when we just yelled at a guy basically nicely a little but about his comment. Yeah. But anyways, so yeah, that's I feel like that's kind of a wimpy place to end off on it, so we're not going to do anything about it, but that's where we are. We're out of time. So to finish up, we'd like to give some thank yous to some folks.
Right.
Or some shout outs, I guess. The first one is not really a thank you as much as it is just a shout out. Because Eliza hasn't really been doing anything for me lately to warrant a thank you. But you know what? This is a shout out to Eliza, the Eliza Caton. She's Eliza Caton. This shout out is brought to you by Eliza Caton.
This is like the inception of shout outs.
Yeah. I was happy with this one though.
Okay.
I don't know why. I like this one. And we'd also like to give a huge actual thank you and a shout out to all the wonderful folks who support us on Patreon.
Right. That would be Bumble Ben, Consul Peasant, and Edwoon at the top tier last word. Sinemac and Mohammed Albshaiti at the Your Message Here tier. Shawn Farrell, Daniel Simonson, Aaron Maule, Michael DeVries, Brandon C., Irvin Ruiz, Eddydoo, and Hoshi 127 supporting us on the credited level. And Chris Wolf, Scarlet Danny, Awesome Gamer 2for1, Pavu RS, Gavin Malott, and Isfar E at the gratitude level.
Thank you so much for your support, and thanks so much to all of you for watching or listening. We'll see you next time. Komoda!